regions, districts, take this to scale. How do you take the pockets that continue to show excellence across Ohio and take it to scale? How do you build capacity? How do you make sure everybody's successful and so forth? So I want to kind of just touch upon a little bit about what we know sort of from this science. And I'm going to be largely kind of stealing from Dean Fixon and Karen Blase and their center on the Scaling Up Center, SISIP. I can't remember what that ever stands for. That's the acronym, SISIP. School Implementation Scalability. I can't remember. But you can look up sisip.org, I think is the actual, and find they've got this great monograph on how we take this to scale. So basically they say, okay, let's start with what doesn't work. What doesn't work is what we know are notorious in education and doing. Information and training alone won't change behavior. It's not real empirical, but if you look at Showers, Joyce Showers' work about professional development training, she's got these great formulas where you do a 2-hour in-service with no practice follow-up. Teachers retain, I don't know, was it 5–10%? Right? I mean, it's abysmal. But then you add a little bit of follow-up, it goes up, it increases. You add follow-up plus technical assistance, and now all of a sudden you're talking in the 80–90% range, which is what you want to see as an outcome in building fluency, right? So we know training and information alone doesn't change behavior. What does work? Well, what works is a lot of hard work. We've got to commit to long term. We've also got very short attention spans in education. It's got to be skills-based training, not just a lot of theory, a lot of information. On our website, if you're a visitor or you're going to become a future visitor, you'll find we don't have the curriculum. We have a series of blueprints. The first and most critical is the implementer's blueprint. And we use the term blueprint intentionally, because this is sort of the skeleton to build this. You've got to figure out whether it's colonial or this or that, or what your house ultimately is going to look like. But every house has got to have certain features, a foundation, support, et cetera, right? So those are essential features. So the implementer's blueprint, there's one on data evaluation, and then we've just put one out that's due to be revised, but on professional development. And what we've done is we say always start with the outcome in mind and work backwards. So whether you've got the luxury of doing 4 days of training or whether you just have 2 hours, focus on what you want the team to master, and then how are you going to measure that? So you'll find in that blueprint key outcomes across the tiers and tools to measure whether or not that happened. We've got to, again, give that performance feedback, and as always, we're continually evaluating and feeding things back in. In fact, Gusky's also done a lot of work on professional development, probably one of the better reads out there. He's got a really nice book about kind of some of the essential features and again, showing what doesn't work and what does work. And people always want to start with this belief and believe things, right? In fact, I've got a colleague who has a great line one time. He was, sorry about that. Probably just busted that guy's eardrum. Sorry, sound guy. He talked about, it's like, look, I'm not asking anybody to buy anything today. Just rent it for a while. That's all I want. Just rent it for a bit, right? We focus on these beliefs. Oh, we got to get buy-in. We got to get everybody to believe. And I said, no, you don't. Here's what you've got to do. You've got to go in and teach me something to solve my problem. If you give me a skill that will solve my problem, then I'm going to start believing. So I always point out, look, like, don't do this as a rah-rah. Don't do this belief and, okay, everybody's good. No. Start with the data. What are you struggling with? We're struggling with kids leaving their book bags in the hallway. Okay, here's what we can do to reduce that. Put it in place. Okay, we'll try. I don't know. They try it. Wow, that worked. And then they're hungry and ready to go and solve the next problem. Years ago, we were doing some training in St. Louis. I had an alternative high school. We kind of got to the morning break, and the director came up. She's like, I think we need to leave. It's like, why? What's up? It's like, well, we're in this alternative school, and every one of our kids is kind of in that red area of the continuum. And I said, okay, do you have common expectations across your school? Well, we've got some big ideas. I said, are all teachers implementing consistently? Well, some probably do a better job than the other. And I said, look, you're already here. I said, you have 0 to lose, right? You got nothing to lose. So why don't you just hang in there, try it. We'll see you back in 3 months. If you don't, then just shoot me an email and say, oh, we're going to pass. Okay, All right, so they kind of sat there and they get, oh, this is just, it's too basic. It's like, went back, did the follow-up. It's like, anybody get any questions, comments? Whew. I mean, this woman's hand shot up before I could even get the thing done. It's like, she goes, yes, I'd like to say something. It's like, by all means, come on up. And she basically just started going on and on about, oh my God, this worked. It worked. We thought, no way, we got these tough kids. We went back, we put rules, routines, we taught, we started feedback. It's amazing how quickly these kids changed, right? They didn't believe it. None of them were buying it until they went back and solved their problem. Then they were actually on board. We talk about, 80% of the staff being committed, and that's a key piece. And that's relatively easy to get. Another weird thing we do in education is we focus on the 1 or 2 who don't play. And I tell teams, look, ignore them. Focus on the 98% who are saying, yes, we'll do this. Show us how. Focus your time, energy, and attention on the ones who want to play. I joke, I show that continuum. I say, you know what, school faculties fall out the exact same way. And it's true. 80% are like, yes, let's go. Tired of dealing with behavior, show me the way. 5-10%, I don't know, this sounds like something we did about 5 years ago. It didn't really work. They need more practice. They need to see. And then you got that 5%, always the first to speak at a faculty meeting. It's a bunch of crap. If the principal just blah, blah, blah. They need highly individualized behavior support plans. Hence the reason we have administrators on our team. And I joke with my schools, I said, now if your administrator's a 5% guy, come talk to me at break. We'll work out a plan on that, right? The point being, as you think about unrolling this, as you think about how do we get started, advice is always start small, start manageable, start with schools you know can be successful, lead those schools to solve their problems. The way this catches fire is not us, not you, it's principals talking to each other. So they all meet, and they got to talk about data, and a principal will say, you know what, we've reduced suspensions by 45%, we've reduced office referrals by this level, we basically eliminated, and all the others like, wait a minute, how'd you get that? What are you doing? What's going on? Then they all want it, right? They all want it. If you just say, you got to do this, you got to believe, not going to happen. You give them strategies to solve their problems. The other thing that I briefly mentioned is that, the other piece you've got to pay attention to is just sort of human learning and the way things scale up. On the left side are these phases of implementation that Fixon and others have taught us. And again, we learned this the hard way. So we had one of my rock star schools, research school. Where are you in this process? And then making sure we pay attention to that. As I said, we were talking to this woman the other day in Washington, and again, they used the stimulus funds and they just did tons of training, and all the schools had all this stuff. And the other thing we said is like, look, when the schools start in Tier 2, they're in exploration, initial implementation. I said, just start with one grade level. Just start with one classroom. Work the bugs out. Then build on that success. Don't take it school-wide day one. You'll overwhelm everybody. Understand these sort of phases. Understand the readiness within the school. We're going to be much more successful in making sure they implement with high fidelity. And then the other piece again is we're more efficient learners than our kids, but we learn through the same phases. Are our schools at acquisition? They're still trying to figure this out. Or they got it, now we need to move to fluency, and so forth. It's an important reminder as, again, leaders. The other piece is that we talk about within districts, regions, however you guys sort of unroll this and spin it out, we have to build this parallel process. So we teach the schools data practice systems. We do the same thing at our district level, region level, state level. Data practice systems. So in my state of Missouri, we have a state leadership team that meets monthly. We look at data every time we meet. Where are schools? What are schools needing? We align our resources based on what schools need. We tailor our summer institute based on the level the teams across the state. So we apply that same logic to the district, region, state level as well. Right? We build a parallel process, and as I said, those blueprints are important. One of the figures in the blueprint is this logic model here. So you have a state leadership team, you have a district leadership team, you have a school leadership team. At the district, region, and state, the leadership team has a lot of these pieces, funding, visibility, policy, but they've also then got to coordinate all of these things. That training, coaching, evaluation, and as I said, we know we've got to provide that behavioral expertise. You see school teams or implementation down here. So each of the leadership teams have these functions. So at the school level, I got to make sure the PTA is informed. I got to make sure the community is informed, my families. So I'm still doing a lot of that visibility of political support at the district, region, at the state level, right? And then in addition, we've got to make sure everybody has good tools, the training support. So here's an example of where I live in Columbia Public. There's the leadership team. They meet quarterly. That's who comes to the team. You notice it's not just special ed, it's not just gen ed, it's all of the key decision makers in the district. Give them updates, here's what's going on across our schools, talk about our needs and so forth. Again, this is what they do, I just told you this. They meet quarterly, they present data. Annually, they again do a big evaluation and make a report to the school board and to all the stakeholders. Some of the key activities of the district, and I'm going through this quick because again, I'll get this to you. If you're an employee in the district, you get at minimum an hour overview. So if you're a chef, a cook, you're a janitor, you're going to get an overview about what school-wide PBS is all about. Because we want every adult to understand what it is we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. We build in, and the other piece, the way this plays out is, I talked about training alone doesn't work. We provide training. That ongoing technical assistance is so critical. In all of our states, regions, and districts, we have what we call external and internal coaches. External are people who are outside of the school whose job it is to provide TA. I've been really fortunate in Missouri, get to brag about it a little bit. I have close to 45 people employed full-time who do nothing but provide training and direct TA to schools. We also are regionalized. We've got what we call our regional professional development centers. Each of those regions across the state have at least 1 or 2 full-time PBS coordinators. Then I've got a group of 10 Tier 2, Tier 3 who develop all the curriculum, develop the materials, develop the training, and then push down into the regions. We've been fortunate that our State Department has funded that. That's one way to go about it. Wisconsin's doing it differently. Illinois does it differently. Colorado does it differently. So there are lots of good examples out there that your state can look to. In fact, we've got a monograph that should be on the website. We got a paper coming out where that's what we did. We looked at, I think it was 9 or 10 states that have really built great capacity. And said, okay, what did you guys do? How did you fund this? How did you roll it out? What were those critical pieces? And so you've got that to look at to figure, again, sort of making this sort of roll out and work. The other thing that they did, which is just, it should have been like, well, yeah, duh. We took their school district improvement plan and we mapped it to what we were doing with school-wide PBS. And basically showed, right, so here's the strategy, there's the objective, here's the action plan, and this is how our PBS efforts are addressing that. So we map those things together, right? Remember, this is a problem-solving framework. The district says, here's our improvement goals. How does school-wide PBS support that goal? How does it link and lead? What evidence, what data will show that we're reaching that goal? So what's happened so far to date, sort of nationwide, worldwide? Well, the U.S. Department of Education right now says nothing exists and nothing's evidence-based until you randomized control trial. So here are some. There are many more emerging. What do all those things say? They all say this. We've reduced major behavior problems. We get improvements in academic achievement. We get improved school climate, and so forth and so on. So across these randomized control trials, we're showing evidence that we're building environments to increase the likelihood kids can learn and kids can behave. Even at the high school level, those tough, difficult high schools. West Charlotte, right? Again, difficult area, lots of free reduce, had significant reductions and suspensions. Another school out of North Carolina, Triton High School, small rural school, halved their dropout rate in about 2 years by implementing some of the essential features of school-wide PBS. Mountain View High School in Colorado went from last to first in their district in terms of achievement. Didn't do anything different instruction-wise, focused on building an environment through school-wide PBS. In fact, what they did is they basically stopped thinking like a high school and started really behaving more like a middle school. What does that mean? They created kind of these houses within the school. So sure, all the math people met, but then they also had these vertical meetings. So every teacher who taught a kid within, I think they called them houses, would meet. They'd look at data. Who's struggling? What can we do differently? How can we make, build in some supports? They basically started looking at kids and what kids needed versus, well, this is how we're organized and here's how we respond. School in my state, Lebanon, again, small rural, all of the challenges, right? They don't have this, they don't have that, but yet showed a 25% reduction within about a year. And then here are some data from my state that are pretty damn exciting. This is a busy graph, okay? Here's what this graph says. If you are doing school-wide PBS and you've got the whole continuum in place, those are our gold schools. We have a statewide recognition system. So brown, universal, silver, you got tier 2, gold, you've got the whole continuum. Okay, and you've got to document evidence that you got it with fidelity and kid outcomes. If you're doing school-wide PBS at the gold level, you fare about the same as non-PBS schools, okay, on our statewide achievement tests. So in other words, we know that implementing school-wide PBS, there's not a causal link to academic improvement achievement. We know it's correlated. Now, the way I view these data are a couple things. One, schools in the prep, emerging, bronze, and silver, the right schools are coming to us, because look how low they are, right? They're saying, wow, we're not being successful. We got to do something different. So that's pretty exciting. But here's the really exciting. These are schools who are not doing school-wide PBS. These are schools who are. These are IEP kids, state achievement scores. Now, again, we've got very few schools in the gold. We don't quite have, as many as the non-PBS, but look at that. Not doing anything different other than school-wide PBS. Yeah?
So did you say that they're implementing across all levels, meaning across all tiers?
Across all tiers, that's right. They've got universals, tier 2, tier 3. So schools that have got the whole continuum far outperform non-PBS schools when we disaggregate and look at our IP kids. So we've got these data. Illinois have got some similar data, so it's pretty cool. So we're putting together this database now across the U.S. to show. And again, the U.S. Department of Ed is thrilled. OSEP is like, yes, this is great. In fact, Michael Houghton came to one of our schools in Kansas City. Anytime we get a new person, they do this sort of yellow bus tour. They go around the state. Well, they picked one of our great star schools that was implementing and could show these data, how their IEP kids were outperforming all other IEP kids across the state because they built an environment to increase the likelihood. And then let me stop and show you finally Field Elementary. And I love to tell Field Elementary's story because, again, I think this is a perfect example of what's possible when you apply this logic to the extreme. So Field had all of the challenges against it. Lots of turnover. It was the school that every district has that says, oh, they'll never make AYP. Just face it. Got all those risk factors. There's nothing we can do, right? They did, however, have a lot of commitment. So these teachers knew what they were doing wasn't working. And they just had a star principal who was committed. Didn't lead them, didn't say, here's what we're doing, but said, okay, what do you want to do? I will back you up 100%. Let's go. I will make it happen. Why did they say we got to do something different? Well, because in their baseline year, only 5% of their kids scored proficient on our statewide assessment. Look at some of the subgroups. 0% of our African American children, 0% of our kids on IEPs, and 0% of our ELL. And they said, look, this isn't acceptable, right? We have got to do something different. So they came to us and they said, well, great, we'll help you. So we built the school-wide PBS side and we built the RTI side, specifically around literacy, okay? Around literacy. Why specifically around literacy? Because when they had that horrible score of 5%, they said, come help. And so we benchmarked them. We used the DIBELS, Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skill. We looked at other data as well, but that's a real quick, easy screener to say whether or not kids are needing support and so forth. And basically found out that 44% of their kids in this school would need highly individualized intensive supports if they even had a prayer to learn how to read. In addition, 290 kids, they're averaging 10.4 ODRs a day. In fact, here's what their literacy score looked like across the continuum. And we shared this data and said, teachers, you keep doing what you're doing, less than 1/3 of your children will ever learn to read. And they knew that. And they said, we know. Help. We don't know what to do. In fact, my school district, oh God, I didn't want to go there. But anyway, part of the problem was they didn't have a reading curriculum. In addition, they didn't even have one at school level, grade level. So you could walk into 3 different grade 2 classrooms and everybody's teaching literacy completely different. And teachers are sort of saying, this is nuts. Help, 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 right? So we built the school-wide PBIS side. They came up with expectation. There's an example of the kids practicing, lining up on recess, hands and feet to self. You notice we do physical characteristics, I said setting. So you see the line with the little, that's where you put your feet. We space them purposely so we can't push and shove and so forth. What happened? Well, we went from 10.4 down to 1.6. Much more manageable, okay? We're keeping kids engaged. We're building an environment to increase the likelihood. What did we do on the literacy side? Here's what we did. They built their entire school day around their data. Their data said what we're doing now is going to fail 2/3 of our children. We've got to rethink practices, and we absolutely got to rethink system supports, right? So they built in a continuum. Tier 1, every classroom got 90 minutes of sustained reading instruction. They built their school day around literacy. And again, we did that problem solving. We started with some ground rules. We said, look, everything's important, but nothing's sacred. That means art, you're going to have to give some minutes up. Music, you're going to give some minutes up. They're still important. Nobody disagrees. Art and music are very important. But if we don't teach these kids to read, it doesn't matter what other things are in their life or not, because we know they're going to continue to fail and struggle. So everybody got 90 minutes, right? They also wisely built in what they called intervention time. So the big challenge, right? A lot of SPED directors here now. You were a SPED teacher at one point. You remember trying to schedule around everybody's schedule? What they should have done is said, no, IEP kids first. What do they need? Now we're going to protect that time. That's what they did. They had I think it was a 40-minute block of intervention time. So if you needed Tier 2 or Tier 3, we've already got time built in. And we've got expertise built in that time that can deliver that. I mean, it was cool. Everybody in this school taught literacy. You would call the school sometimes, you get the voicemail. Sorry, we can't answer the phone right now, we're teaching reading. If it's an emergency, dial this number. If not, leave a message. You know how testing time goes on and everybody puts the sign out their door, please do not disturb, we're testing now. They put that sign out every time literacy was being taught. Please do not disturb unless an emergency, we're teaching reading. They took it that serious, that important. Everybody, janitors, music teachers, PE teachers, cooks, secretaries, somewhere along the line you would see them in there helping kids and teaching literacy. And then some kids would get a little bit more, Tier 2, Tier 3, right? And you see what they did. They adapted a sort of basal reader. They looked through all of the research, what's research validated. And again, one of those pushbacks, if you mandate a curriculum, it takes away teachers' creativity. And what these teachers told us the exact opposite. I can be more creative because I don't have to develop the lesson plan every day. It's there. My creativity comes now when kids aren't getting it, which I'd much rather spend than trying to come up with that core lesson. So they built their day, right? So here's their schedule. When they taught it, that time was sacred and protected. When they had intervention time, sacred and protected. They used data to guide, is this working? So we benchmarked them across, you see, fall, spring. Progress monitoring for kids at Tier 1 was once a month, but you move up, we're looking at every week. We taught teachers, right? We are using the Ames web. We are using tools that exist. We taught teachers what trend lines and aim lines meant. We taught teachers what data looked like and where the zone that you want kids. They got these monthly reports of their classroom. Are kids on track or not? They looked at it as a school. Do we need to change? Do we need something different? So what happened? Well, that took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And here's what happened. This is exactly what you want to have happen. They still have kids walking through the schoolhouse door never been read to, never holding a book. They still got kids not coming up with those prerequisites, but they have built an environment to increase the likelihood. Right? Now, the postscript to Field is this. They built this beautiful new elementary school, and so they closed Field down. They moved the kids to the beautiful new elementary school, but they also brought kids from other schools, got a new principal. Other teachers like, no, we don't need to do that. Guess what happened? Gone in about 6 months. What did their data look like? Just like they did when we started. I mean, the teachers were in tears. The teachers just like, oh my God, this is just, and they couldn't get that traction. Had we built this and done this district-wide, it wouldn't have happened. If this is what we do as a district, here's what we value, here's how we operate, that would just be the way we do business at all our elementary schools. Sure, there's still degrees of freedom. Everybody needs to be different. Principals need to put their stamp on the school. Teachers do too. But it just just broke all of our hearts to watch all of these kids just bloom and blossom, and then knowing that, man, we're just going back to old ways and failing the next generation of kids. So, in sum, key, changing sustainable ways. Your job as leaders across the regions in your state. We've got to build those leadership teams at the district, at the region, at the school. We follow that basic problem-solving logic, data, practice, systems. And we build that parallel process. We teach the teams data practice systems. You guys use data practice systems. I know in early conversations with your state, that's been part of it. They've got data. We've talked about the data. What are the needs? What are the best ways to unroll this across the state? How do we make sure we don't go too fast? And how do we make sure we support the schools who say, yep, we want to do this, we want to play? That's it. Are there conclusions, final comments? Or they just get to go away? Or questions?
Would you comment on, one of my concerns is we reduce the effectiveness of PBIS because we do not involve students enough in the planning, development, and implementation.
Sure.
That it still feels too much constructed, adult planned, and
right.
to say something about that.
That's great. Again, how do we get the kids involved and sort of too much adult top-down? At the elementary level, we typically have their voice. We ask them. I joke with teachers. I said, you guys have probably done this. You ask the kids, elementary, what should be the expectations, what should be the rules. They come up with pretty similar things we would ask. But if you ask them what should happen if kids break the rule, it's scary, isn't it? It's like first offense, little finger, next one, the whole hand's got to come off, right? But if we reframe the question and we say, okay, if we have new kids come to our school, how could we teach them what's expected? They come up with great strategies, great ideas. At those times, and sometimes I find my schools will micromanage kids. So I had this school that was doing great, and so they were just looking for things. They said, well, let's, in the cafeteria, and let's get on this and that. I'm like, back off a little bit, right? There's got to be some times where kids can just be kids, and kids can just figure out how to navigate the kid world, okay? But again, kids come up with great insights. So a good example at the elementary level, we were out there observing on the playground. We came up with rules, but then we had other kids from different grades walk around with clipboards and make notes. And they came and they told us a lot of things. In particular, they told us how they resolve problems. And so they said, well, if there's an argument, and what we do is we go to the kids waiting in line to play, like Foursquare or whatever, and they're the judges. We didn't know they did that. That's an awesome way to resolve the problem. So let's make that standard and formal. So we get the kids' voices. We ask them how they solve, how they teach. When you move into the high school level, secondary level, it just makes perfect sense. In fact, we've got lots of examples of kids leading it. We, years ago, brought together a bunch of high schools to figure out how they did what they did and why it worked. And there was a school out of Rhode Island that said, this started with the kids. Teachers had no interest, but the kids said, no, we need this. That's unsafe. I don't feel safe, And so they really generated that. The last forum, PBIS forum in Chicago, so we have a national forum that we hope to see. I know some of you have attended. We did a session on student voice, and so you can get that PowerPoint. There's a young man in my state that led that school-wide PBS team. And they talk about how they engage kids, and they did fun things. And they used social media, but they used it correctly, not to sort of harass and cyberbullying, but they used all the social media pieces that they did. Montana also, I think it's got a really nice component where they involve kids. They call them youth days. And so what they do is they do parallel training for kids. They bring in student leaders across the state. They'll focus on kind of problem solving, get them engaged. They've got lots of tools, for kids to sort of weigh voice. And again, if you go to that PowerPoint, you can get that. And again, all of the PowerPoints are posted from past forums. And it was startling. One of the principals shared some data. And ask kids, when's the last time a teacher told you you're doing well? A lot of them had never, right? So I think